After working with over 150 e-commerce brands over the last 4 years, I started to notice something crazy. They all struggle with the exact same things. Whether you're doing $1 million per year or $20 million a year, these are the silent killers of profit and the systems that separate the brands that scale from the ones that stall. My name is Patrick O'Driscoll, and at TVG, we work with over 150 e-commerce brands over the last 4 years, generating north of $100 million plus in e-commerce revenue. Today, I'm going to share with you 8 lessons that I've learned over the last 4 years from spending millions on advertising, generating millions through email marketing, creating hundreds of landing pages, and tweaking Shopify sites and building out creatives. Our team has done it all. So let's dive into it. One of the first things that I always see is creative is often the bottleneck. Now, I understand for brands that creative can be expensive, so I know why there's so many issues with this. At all levels, I know that creative is the biggest thing that impacts ad performance. If we're trying to scale a brand, we have to have amazing ads. So the creative bottleneck is something that always slows down brand growth. And one thing is obviously creative fatigue. So many brands struggle to create creative at scale that actually wins and scales in the ad account. And so let's just say you create a batch of creative, you let that launch, but your production is not catching up to the speed that your ads actually need. So the best brands we've worked with produce creative on a predictable cadence, weekly or bi-weekly, using a mix of UGC, in-house shoots, rapid iteration frameworks. And I've created trainings before that go over the process for creating creative at scale. But across all of our brands, usually we're testing anywhere from like 3 to 10 creatives every single week to make sure that we have a constant iteration phase in the ad account. So we're testing new ads every single week to make sure that we can keep up with scale. The worst thing that can happen is that you start to scale your account, you don't have enough creatives to keep up with that scale, your ads start to fatigue, and ultimately performance plateaus. Creative isn't an art, it's really a system when it comes to advertising. And with Meta's new Andromeda update, we've seen this even more prevalent, where we need to have creative diversity. We need to have multiple different versions of creative, UGC, statics, founder videos, high quality videos. The more content that we have, the more scalable the ad account ultimately is. Next, when we dive into these accounts, we really see that paid media is mostly guesswork. So even at like $200,000 a month, I've jumped into brands that are doing $500, $1 million per month, and their ad accounts are a tangled mess. This often happens when you work with an agency or advertisers that just aren't keeping up with the trends. Maybe they have old school ad account structures and they're just super stuck in their ways of how to run an ad account. And now in 2025 and heading into 2026, the whole way of running ads is just constantly changing. So we need to make sure that we have clear testing campaigns, clear scaling campaigns, so that we can actually make improvements in your account. So we shouldn't just be running ads blindly. We need to make sure that we're making educated decisions and making tests that start with one hypothesis. Then we start to script and brief those ads out. We understand why those ads are performing and how to create iterations off of that, right? And so with the creative system that we just discussed, we need to match all that creative with a solid media buying structure to make sure that we can ultimately scale. Every dollar spent should test a hypothesis. And if we're not documenting these learnings, we're not making progress. That's why you might see brands that spend tens of thousands of dollars on ads and are still stagnant. They're not looking at it like a week over week improvement process. And that is what hinders brand growth. And the next lesson is around premium brands. So when I sit down with a brand that wants to remain premium, I think they get super stuck in their ways and actually holds them back from scaling. One thing that I always hear from a premium brand is, oh, we don't want to use UGC, or oh, we don't want to use iPhone content. Everything needs to be completely premium. What I challenge those brands to do is, what do you value more, performance or staying in this premium vibe or branding? Because especially if we're under $1 million a month, we really need to be focusing on performance and scale. What I oftentimes see, here's an example of an ad, right, is like polished but cold, right? It looks premium, but we really want to have is real and relatable content. And you can create premium content that's relatable, that's authentic, that's raw, and this will ultimately yield better results. So founders of premium brands often fear that UGC will cheapen their positioning. They invest heavily in perfect studio shots while their ads underperform. And again, back to today's day and age of Andromeda and creative diversity, if we get stuck in our ways and trying to create these just beautiful creatives, we need to test some, maybe some scrappy ads, or maybe some things that are more organic. And those ads can still be premium, but we need to make sure that we're not getting stuck in our ways and stuck in these boxes or stuck in these false beliefs that hold us back from scale. And emotion beats perfections. Let's make data-driven decisions, not just emotional decisions about what creative should work in the ad account. Next, disconnected teams leads to broken growth engines. This is probably the biggest thing, especially with brands that are probably doing above $300,000 a month. You're growing, you're scaling, you might work with freelancers, you might work with agencies, you have in-house team members. Disconnected teams leads to broken growth engines. And so what we need to make sure is that oftentimes with a brand that's scaling is you have people fighting on all fronts. You have creative strategists, you have editors and graphic designers, you have email people, you have CRO people. Everyone needs to have the same goals in mind because everyone wants to claim that they're driving performance. We even see this on the ad side, right? Meta wants to say that they're driving all the performance. Google wants to say that they're driving all the performance. And that goes into one of my following points about attribution, but we need to make sure that everyone is on the same page. So your ads, email, and creative must talk to each other. Freelancers and siloed teams cause massive leaks in your growth engine. Your paid team launches a new campaign, but email doesn't know about it. Creative produces assets in a vacuum without feedback from performance data. Your retention team has no visibility into acquisition messaging. Unified systems create consistency and compound returns. When your creative informs your paid strategy, which feeds into your email sequences, which generates insights into your next creative brief, that is when exponential growth happens. So what we need to do is align all your messaging. We need to share performance data across our teams, and we need to coordinate launches and build feedback loops. Everyone needs to be on the same page, or else everyone's going to be doing their own thing, and we're not going to be documenting and building off of our learnings. And the next piece is founders stay in the weeds way too long. I usually see this with a brand that's maybe scaled up from 6 figures, 7 figures, starting to over $100,000 a month, is that founders are really stuck in the weeds. And oftentimes the best founders that we work with are super product focused. They want to create amazing products, but they also are super involved in the marketing process. So you can't scale when you're doing everything. So if you're an operator and you're at this point, you're like, oh my gosh, I am doing everything. I'm in so many different areas right now. At $3 to $5 million annual revenue, the biggest bottleneck is typically the founder. You build the business through sheer force of will, but same hands-on approach now limits growth. You're approving every creative, reviewing every campaign, stuck in the tactical weeds. And the shift from operator to orchestrator is painful but necessary. It means hiring people smarter than you in specific domains, building out SOPs that don't require your input, creative systems that run whether you're in the office or on vacation. That doesn't mean becoming disconnected from your business. It means multiplying your impact through people and systems rather than personal execution. You're not running the ads anymore. You're running people, right? And so we need to have that discussion with our brands that are starting to scale, because if they're just too stuck in the weeds, it limits that growth, right? So we need to make sure we have systems and proper things to make sure your time is most well spent as a founder to make sure the system keeps running. Next is retention is the biggest untapped profit lever. Most brands know they should be doing email and SMS, but then we jump into these brands and it's just an absolute mess. We're only generating maybe 10% of revenue through email and SMS. The real target across all of our brands that we work with on average is 35% of top line revenue should be driven through email and SMS. And why is that so powerful? Well, you've already worked so hard to get all these subscribers, and the email channel is so much more profitable, right? You spent all this money on ads. Now you have all the emails and SMS numbers in your database. Let's make sure we're hitting them up constantly. And the main thing that we want to do is improve your lifetime value, because if we can improve your lifetime value, that gives us more flexibility on the advertising side to be more aggressive, right? So the math is simple. Let's say acquiring a customer costs $50. Getting them to buy again costs pennies per email. Yet most brands obsess over CPA while ignoring that gold mine sitting in their Klaviyo account. Winning retention strategy includes all of your flows, clear segmentation, making sure deliverability is up to par, and making sure we have a solid email campaign calendar. Ads acquire customers. Retention is what makes you rich. Very important, especially in this day and age as ad costs start to rise. You need to make sure you're retaining as many customers, because this is where all the profit is built. Next is you're probably scaling off of bad data. Previously, a lot of agencies, a lot of advertisers were super focused on ROAS, right? You might see in your ad account, oh, we have a great ROAS. But then you look at Meta, you look at Google, everyone's claiming that they're driving the best performance, right? So platform ROAS ignores the customer acquisition cost, overhead, and COGS. And so what we need to do is we need to look at performance from a more omni-channel standpoint. The main things that we're looking at here is we're looking at true new customer acquisition costs. We're looking at your marketing efficiency ratio. We're looking at contribution margin. We're looking at your lifetime value and your lifetime gross profit. Those are the metrics that actually tell us, is the brand actually scaling, or are we hemorrhaging cash and staying in the red? You really can't make smart decisions on dirty data. And yeah, even with third-party attribution tools like Triple Whale or Hyros, right? You can use these tools, they're great, but also you can zoom out and look at things from an omni-channel approach and say, let me look at my Shopify channel. And what we usually do is we build out a Shopify P&L, right? So we see for your e-commerce side, what's the top line revenue? How many new customers are we getting? What's the ad spend? What's the agency fee? What's your overhead? That way we can see how we're actually scaling your business from a holistic standpoint and not getting stuck in the weeds leads of this false data. So we really need to make sure that we're making decisions off of the right data points, not just looking at, oh, the ROAS is good, let's scale. Because 9 times out of 10, that doesn't tell the whole story of the entire business. So super important here is that, yeah, maybe 2, 3, 4 years ago, you can scale based off ROAS. Now we have to look at the impacts of the entire business. Now, here's something that's super important is that even if you're working with the agency typically isn't the strategy, the system is. So most agencies push buttons and great ones build systems. This is a big shift that we have had to do over the last 4 years, is shifting from, yeah, we run your ads or we send emails, to actually understanding and building systems that the brand can leverage well beyond, you're working with the agency. So the main things that we look at here is converting creative, optimized or omnichannel marketing, retention systems, and expansion and scale. These are the 4 pillars that we discuss with our partners that are the main things and systems that we need to have built out for the brand. We need to have solid creative. We need to make sure we're executing the advertising and make sure your CRO is up to par. We need to make sure that we're retaining these customers. And then when we expand and scale, what is the financial impact on the business? What are some forecast tools that we can use to make sure that we're scaling and not just scaling to spend more money on ads? We need to make sure that all of these things are aligned. And so really that's what our intention is when we sit down and work with the brands. We're not just an agency that runs your ads. We're actually building out a framework and a system in your business and then executing on that system so we understand what are the main things that are driving top line growth and ultimately bottom line profit. Scaling comes down to this structure. Creative cadence, you need to make sure you produce solid creative on a consistent basis every single week. Scientific paid media, you need to make sure that your ads are being run. You use all those creatives, make sure you have a scientific process for testing and scaling those ads. We need to make sure we're connection over aesthetics. We need to make sure we're telling authentic stories. We're not just showing our product. We're bringing customers into our ecosystem and buying them into the brand. Unified systems, we need to make sure we're not operating in silos. Your ads, your email, your creative, your CRO, we all need to make sure we're on the same page to ultimately scale. Retention drives profit. Email and SMS should drive 30 to 40% of revenue. Stop leaving money on the table with neglected subscriber lists. And lastly, clean data foundation. These 6 things are vital to make sure that your e-commerce brand is scaling effectively. Really what we want to do when we sit down with brands is build systems, not just a strategy. What we actually do is we start with an audit. The audit, before we even pitch you a strategy, helps us get a baseline of where you're currently at on these 4 pillars. C, converting creative. O, omnichannel paid media. R, retention. And E, expansion. So those 4 pillars is how we jump in and look at a brand and say, okay, what is lacking here? For some brands, it might be creative. For some brands, it might be a poor media buying structure, or your CRO, your site is not converting up to standard, or you're not retaining your customers. Or lastly, you're just hemorrhaging way too much cash because you don't know exactly how well your ad budgets are being managed, right? So that's really our intention here. So if you'd like to get a core growth audit, I'll leave a link down below to book in a call with me personally so I can map out and understand your entire business. And then from there, that's where we build out a full custom strategy on executing all of these things. I will also leave a video that'll pop up on the screen here shortly that goes over our whole system, how we actually build out that CORE, that core growth engine into brands. Make sure to watch that video. And if you want more trainings just like this one, make sure to subscribe as I drop new e-commerce trainings every single week. I'll see you guys in the next video.